Hi everyone, welcome to my Shoreline Studio. I'm Sybille Muschik. Behind the camera is Joshua Blanc, and today we're going to do marbling. I'm starting off with a 1/4 cup of alum into a bowl. We're going to add 4 cups of hot water. And this is the mordant that prepares the paper. Now I found with the hammer mill paper that I'm using that it seems to print pretty well on its own without doing the mordant, but I advise you to do the mordant because it might last longer. Okay, one more 2-cup measurement here. And that's good. Okay, we'll get those out of the way. So stir with your wooden spoon. Got a little floater in here. Okay, no problem. Then we take our paper. I've cut regular hammer mill copy paper in half. And I just dump the whole thing in and out, let it just drip off. And I'll give it to Josh to lay on a safe place. You need that to be dried totally. Now I've already prepared some papers, so we'll just go to the next step and we'll get rid of this bowl. Now I just want to take you through some of the other tools and things we're going to be using. There is a marbling kit out there, probably Amazon, Opus in Vancouver has them, lots of other places, probably Dick Blick, and just Google, marbling kits, and you'll get a nice group of tools. These are, and you can make these. This one might be a little more difficult. That's for the finer work. We'll get into that not in this session. And for the most part, we'll be just using a little skewer. Call it a stylus for fancy. Now, the paint that the kit comes with needs to be tempered with an extender, a latex extender. Now, they recommend, this is the Marbleeze, Liquitex Marbleeze, but I find, me, I'm always a frugal person. This is Zinsser latex extender. It works just as well, if not better. And you add, well, it's up to you. You'll have to see. I usually add twice the amount of extender to paint. What you want to do to make sure is that your paint will float on the surface and not drop down. And if it's dropping down, you don't have enough extender. And always shake your bottle before you, drop your drops in. Now there's other ways of putting paint in. The Ebru, which is the Turkish formal marbling, they have containers and they have special water-based paints. So we won't be getting into that. We're using acrylic paint that's had the extender put in for floating. And I just want to show you a few of the things. Here are some of mine patterns you can make. You can make flowers. We'll be maybe getting to a flower today. You can do sort of a herringbone pattern. And this is fabric as well. You can marble fabric. I put some sizing on this so that quilt makers could use this kind of thing. And as usual, we're probably going to be going reasonably off the deep end with what we do. This is a little flower I did yesterday. And, you can make some reasonable leaves, some abstract patterning. And so then we get to our little vat here of sizing, and I'm using carrageenan. It's a type of moss. There are many other things you can use. You can use methyl cellulose. You could use starch. There's a whole group of things. Just Google and see what you have on hand. Often you can make the sizing with other things. But carrageenan maybe is a bit pricey. Methylcellulose, not so much. I'm not sure it's as effective as this. So sodium alginate works as well, and I think that comes in like a container like that. And the way to do that is there's a formula for it. It will tell you on the package of how much you need to add water to it. And I just used, I think, 3 or 4 tablespoons to about 4 gallons of water, and then I let it sit approximately 2 days, and everything dissolved beautifully, and it just makes a nice medium here, so, or size if you want. So the first thing you do is just cut up some old flyers and things, newspapers, what have you, and clear the top for air bubbles and whatnot. Have a basket next to you handy so that you can just drop it in there. This is important because if you have bubbles in there, that makes a white spot, and you don't want that in your work. And things float around in the air so that, and probably land in your little vat here. And then when you've finished with your pattern, you clear it again, or you leave some of it in there depending on how you're working. I usually start with a darker color. Maybe we'll start with this green. I'm just going to shake it up really good. And then, so you just drop some drops down into your sizing, and you can see it right away. And we call it traveling when it spreads really fast. That means you might have a little bit too much of the extender in it. That's okay. If it sinks to the bottom, you don't have enough extender in it. So far, so good. So the first one, we're just going to do some bubbles. So you can do, everything is with a circle, so the drops are circles. So you do circles and circles. And be careful, don't squeeze the bottle too hard or you'll just have a mess on your hands. Just enough to get a drop out. This is a phthalo blue, so it's a very staining color and very intense. So clean your little nozzle head. Put your lid back on. So maybe we'll give it some contrast. I should talk a little bit about the containers too. The kits often come with little bottles like this with a top that goes with it. And I went to the drugstore because I had a whole school of classes that were going to take marbling. So I needed a whole bunch of different containers, and I wanted to have each station to have all the colors, so I had to make an awful lot of colors up. So the pharmacist recommended this little dropper unit, and they were reasonable. So I'm sure, you know, your local pharmacist will help you find a reasonable container that will work for your purposes. So I'm just adding a bit of blue. This one travels a bit as well, but not as much as the turquoise. And it's not sinking to the bottom, which is a good thing. Now it doesn't look like much when you're doing this, but the colors are often very intense. Don't put too much in because it gets to a point of saturation and then it just drops to the bottom. And then you're just wasting your paint. Okay, clean that up. And we'll try a little bit more turquoise. This is a lovely color. It's a really teal kind of turquoise color. So this is just to show you that everything is a circle when you start with this. And sometimes it can look like jade or, you know, cut stone. Okay, wipe. And let's print. So now you have a choice. You can either use a large one or these prepared ones. So we could probably put it in this way and do a couple of them. This pan happens to fit it nicely. Be sure and degrease your pan, whatever you're using. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work. There are a number of variables you have to be mindful of with marbling, but for the most part it's fairly simple. Sometimes your paper curls, but it will uncurl. So basically, this is a lot like your gelatin prints, except the sizing is what you're putting your work on. Then you just lift a corner and you scrape off the sizing on the side. Let it drip. And it dries really well. If you have too much sizing, like it's too thick, it will crack in a day or so. And all your paint will fall off. Not a good thing. Which has happened. That will also happen if your room temperature is too warm. I'm just going to give it to Josh, maybe on a paper towel, and he can, so he doesn't get too mucked up.
Let's show it down here.
Okay. Right.
There we go.
Okay. And that's one. And so take your time, let the pattern develop. Scrape it off really well. Let it drip. And where the paper is white is where the drops hadn't enlarged to that point. So, okay. So that's that. Oops. There we are. Now that's pretty, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So then we clear again. Get off as much of the paint as you can. You can leave it and just keep working, but your thickened water here just gets more and more mucky, and that could be interesting. I've often worked that way, and you get these really sort of luscious grade things that have a lot of character. But I usually leave that till the end when the water is kind of starting to get mucky anyway. So clear off what you can. You won't get everything, it's below the surface. So let's start with a lighter color this time. And we'll see if we can create a pattern. And yellow tends to travel well too. And again, has very intense color. When you put a drop between it, it makes the other circles smaller. That's one way of controlling your work. And believe it or not, you can get squares if you work hard at it. So which means you can actually create little structures. I've done a whole row of houses once. So many creative things, fun imagery you can create with this. All with just starting with circles. And it's a very relaxing way of working, art making. It has its own sort of timing to it. You can't rush it. And if you have little air bubbles, try and pop them because they will leave what we call counters, little white spots. Some of them don't like to be killed. All right, so let's try a little bit of this color. Yeah, I'll probably need to shake it. I had shaken it before we started the session, but let's just do it again. And you can see it's going to be very intense color. So to stop it from traveling, you just add another circle close to it. See, and it just pushes it. And you can do a circle within a circle. Now these paints I've had sitting around for maybe 2 or 3 years since I've done any marbling, and it seems like the extender refurbishes the color, which is kind of nice. Let's go back to the yellow. Well, you see, once you've got too much, then the stronger color dominates. It will spread eventually. Something to watch out for. Okay, so then you can play with it. Just let it sort of spread on its own. Here's a bubble. Out. Kill the bubble. We'll just get rid of it on the side. Stubborn bubble. Okay, so use your stylus and start making patterns. And you can go back this way. And then you can do it once more. See, it's just the right consistency. It's, if it were too thick, yeah, you couldn't do much of anything, and you don't get much of a pattern. If it's too thin, it just won't stay. It just keeps moving. So this way, we've got getting some nice patterning. So I'm going to use a big sheet for printing this. This one is unsized, and it will not be quite as intense. I just want you to see the pattern. But hammer mill paper seems to have not much sizing in it, and that makes all the difference. The Hebrew papers, they don't have any sizing at all. That's why you can use just plain watercolor. I'm not sure what medium they use with it. Maybe a bit of, well, I better not say because I'm not sure. So, gum Arabic maybe, but I'm speculating. It's all a deep, dark secret. Well, originally, the Chinese invented marbling, and then the Japanese had less substance in the bottom, and whatever their bath was, and then they just placed the paper on top of that very thin layer, and mixed the colors and so forth, and then took a print, and it's called sumagashi. You can look that up. So here's our, again, let it drip off. We're getting a little bit of the residual turquoise, but that's nice. And I'll place it beside here, and then we can see what happened. So it's quite striking. Look at the intensity of the color, even though this paper is not sized. It would be even, I think the pink would be more intense if it were. Okay, I'll give it to Josh to deal with. And we'll take a quick break. Josh will put a little interlude in while I'll clear all this off. Okay, so I'm putting in a little container here some of the black. It's very intense, tends to travel too far. And we're just going to use a brush, maybe a little bit like Ebro style. And you just need a soft brush. They use a very special brush, and you can send for those. I think it might come in with some of the kits too. And then what they do is they hit the side of their hand like this and make little dots. And that might be the way to control the black. Maybe once more. The black is nice because it gives you that color intensity and contrast that you want. But as you can see, the dots are smaller than. Now we should be able to get into. Of course, then you have dots everywhere, but other than that. Yeah, okay. You can also touch the tip of the brush to it. Just add a little bit of paint. And just add a tip here and there. So that's another way of working. Okay, so let's try maybe our turquoise, which was really nice. A little bit here and there. It's kind of falling on me. And then the yellow. If their traveling colors have gone across the vat of our thickened water, they will just sink. So you have to, that's one variable you have to control. And again, we'll just use our stylus. And we're making sort of a feather herringbone kind of pattern here. And you can go this way. And that way. And it's all very delicate. It's quite lovely. We have a few bubbles. Sometimes bubbles are interesting, so if you have a bubble that's in the right place, just leave it. But what happens is it will be leaving a blank, a white blank behind, because that's the color of your paper. If you had different colored paper that you're marbling onto, well, then that could be an element of interest. Okay, we're just going to leave the bubble. And we'll use one of the papers here that's prepared with the alum. And just let it sit for a minute and pick up the paint. You still have to clear everything off when you finish, unless you want those colors to influence the next work. And this is quite subtle with the black. Let it drip off. I'll just put it down here. And this one. So that's the kind of thing you get when you use more of the brush. You get more subtle pattern. Okay, can you, yeah, take that one. Actually, the counter is perfect. It's right in the center of whatever this is. Looks very pale floral almost. Okay, we're going to clear our vat really well this time because I want to go and maybe we'll see if we can make a flower. So turquoise again. And just a little bit in the corners. This one might have a hole somewhere because it seems to be dripping on me. Okay. Now we'll try for the reason I'm using fuchsia for the flower, of course, it's Christmas cactus time, so. And that's usually the color they are. So we'll just add a tiny bit. And we might be able to control that. So you can have as many petals as you want just by pulling it into the center. And if you want the petals to have points on them, you pull it the other way. This doesn't really look like a Christmas cactus, but you get the idea. Let's see if the violet will stay put in the center, or it might just sink because the traveling colors tend to push it down. Oh, it spreads a little bit. You can add a little bit of the fuchsia maybe. Okay, so let's try our leaves. Well, it's looking good because it's pushing the flower back, making it behave. So you just pull it that way. You can make a heart-shaped leaf, I guess. And you can do a stem. We'll just concentrate on doing our leaves. So this will be quite an exotic flower. And then we'll just give it a circle here. Try for more of the purple. Just for some contrast. Swirling it around gives it a nice center, like flower center. There we go. A few bubbles. Okay. Lost our heart shape here. But you can play with this for quite a while. Just don't overdo it. We'll just use an untreated page because it covers the whole thing and it seems to print really well. I'm very surprised. This is hammer mill paper though, so. Oh, see, it'll curl a little bit sometimes. Now to get the colors to behave, because it seems that the Zinsser latex extender does make the color travel a bit more than it should. So what is it? This is the one, the Marbleese, which is similar. You might have a little more control with it, but I'm not unhappy with this. So you just let it curl off here. There, it just settles back down. And it looked like it was pretty intense. It's hard to tell in the vat itself as well what you're going to end up with. So it's also always a little experimental. So there's our very exotic flower with leaves. So it's amazing what you get, and just endless fun. So give this a try. I don't think the kits are all that expensive. We'll be working more with the tools in the next session. So join us again here at Shoreline Studio, and more marbling, more fun adventures. Have a wonderful holiday season. If that's the time you are seeing this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. That's how our channel grows, and we appreciate all of you who are doing that. So, bye for now.